6 boys vanished during a school field trip in 1985, leaving families devastated and the community of Salem, Oregon in shock. 16 years later, explorers discovered a rusty school bus in a remote forest canyon, which reignited the question, who was responsible for the disappearance? Morning sunlight streamed into the quiet kitchen in Salem, Oregon, when the telephone's sudden ring broke the calm of Patricia Thompson's breakfast routine. "Patricia, you need to sit down." Her sister Helen's voice trembled through the receiver. "Some explorers found a red school bus in Cascade Canyon. The police think it might be connected to Michael and those other boys." The wooden spoon slipped from Patricia's fingers, clattering against the linoleum floor as 16 years of buried grief suddenly resurged. The devastating news felt surreal as Patricia struggled to process Helen's frantic explanation about professional cave explorers making an impossible discovery. Her 10-year-old son, Michael, had vanished with 5 classmates during what should have been a simple nature study trip to Silver Falls. The search had consumed months of her life, countless volunteers, and every resource the small Oregon community could muster. Now, after all these years of unanswered questions, someone had apparently found the missing school bus. Helen's voice continued, explaining how the exploration team had been conducting a geological survey of the remote canyon system when they noticed the deteriorated red vehicle. The bus was wedged between massive fallen logs in an area accessible only by rappelling down steep rock walls with specialized climbing equipment. The location was so isolated that search helicopters had never spotted it during the original intensive investigation that had gripped Salem throughout the summer of 1985. Heavy footsteps on the front porch announced Detective James Smith's arrival within the hour, his weathered face bearing the same grave expression Patricia remembered from 16 years ago. "We've confirmed the license plate matches the missing Willowbrook Elementary School bus," he said gently, removing his hat as he entered her living room. "I wanted you to hear this directly from me before the media gets hold of the story." His careful tone suggested there would be much more difficult news to follow. Patricia's memory transported her back to that terrible April morning when Michael had bounced excitedly toward the bright red school bus, his small backpack stuffed with sandwiches and a thermos of chocolate milk. The children had been chattering about exploring waterfalls and collecting specimens for their science projects during the day-long field trip to Silver Falls State Park. She could still picture Michael waving from the bus window, his gap-toothed smile beaming with anticipation for the adventure ahead. Detective Smith explained that forensic teams were already working to secure the remote crash site, though accessing the canyon would require specialized mountain rescue equipment due to the treacherous terrain. 16 years of weather exposure might have compromised crucial evidence, he warned, his professional demeanor softening with genuine sympathy. "But we're going to examine every inch of that vehicle and the surrounding area. Your family deserves answers after all this time waiting." The detective's departure left Patricia alone with her racing thoughts, but the telephone's persistent ringing demanded her immediate attention. 3 separate calls displayed unknown number on her caller identification, each one ending abruptly when she answered with an increasingly frustrated hello. The mysterious hang-ups felt somehow menacing in the wake of such momentous news, as if someone was monitoring her reaction to the bus discovery. After the detective's visit, Patricia moved through her house mechanically, trying to process the overwhelming information about the bus discovery. Her reading glasses had vanished from their usual spot on the kitchen table, causing her to search frantically through drawers and countertops. She finally discovered them placed carefully on Michael's old bedroom desk, though she distinctly remembered leaving them downstairs. The strange displacement felt unsettling, adding another layer of unease to an already emotionally charged evening. "Father, give me strength to face whatever truth lies ahead," Patricia whispered, her fingers finding the small silver cross pendant that Michael had proudly presented to her for Mother's Day just weeks before his disappearance. The familiar weight of the necklace provided comfort as she struggled with the conflicting emotions of hope and dread. After 16 years of uncertainty, the discovery might finally provide answers, but she feared what those answers might reveal about her son's fate. Pastor William Clark's compassionate voice offered immediate comfort when Patricia called seeking spiritual guidance and emotional support. "The entire congregation will be praying for you and the other families," he assured her, his gentle tone reflecting years of counseling grieving parishioners. "God sees everything, Patricia. Even when we can't understand his plan, we'll organize prayer chains and meal trains, just like we did during the original search." His promise of community support reminded her that she wouldn't face this renewed ordeal alone. Sleep seemed impossible as Patricia lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed Detective Smith's careful words about the bus discovery. Through her bedroom curtains, the street appeared empty and peaceful, but she couldn't shake the persistent feeling that someone had been watching her house throughout the evening. Every shadow seemed threatening, every sound potentially significant, as if the discovery had awakened something dangerous that had been dormant for 16 long years. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel and activate notification bells to hear more stories like this one. Dawn broke grey and overcast as Patricia drove toward the canyon access point, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly while Detective Smith's patrol car led the way through winding forest roads. The remote location felt increasingly ominous as they climbed higher into the Cascade Mountains, leaving civilization behind with each mile. "I never imagined it was this far from the main route," Patricia said when they finally parked at the makeshift command post. "How did anyone ever expect to find them out here?" Mountain rescue specialists had established a complex pulley system to safely transport equipment and personnel down the treacherous canyon walls to reach the crash site. "The bus rolled approximately 200 feet straight down," explained Captain Rodriguez, pointing toward the steep rock face that dropped into darkness below. Search helicopters in 1985 would never have spotted the wreckage from above because of the dense tree canopy and the way it wedged between those massive fallen logs down there. Inside the deteriorated vehicle, forensic technicians were carefully cataloging metal objects that had survived 16 years of exposure to the elements. Detective Smith held up several items in clear evidence bags: belt buckles, shoe eyelets, and a tarnished class ring that made Patricia's breath catch in her throat. "This was Michael's," she whispered, recognizing the small eagle design he had been so proud to receive for perfect attendance. He never took it off, not even for baths or swimming. The most shocking discovery came when the lead forensic technician emerged from the bus, carrying a section of twisted metal brake line. "Detective, you need to see this," she called, holding the component up to the morning light. These lines were cut cleanly with a sharp tool, not torn or crushed by impact damage. Someone deliberately sabotaged this vehicle's braking system before it ever left the school parking lot. The revelation transformed everything from tragic accident to premeditated murder. Donald Anderson's renewed questioning had taken place earlier that morning at the police station, but Detective Smith's expression suggested the field trip supervisor remained frustratingly evasive about crucial details. "He keeps changing his story about where exactly he was when the bus went off the road," Smith explained as they walked back toward their vehicles. "Anderson claims he was separated from the children during a nature walk, but his timeline doesn't match the physical evidence we're finding." Anderson had maintained his original statement that driver Robert Johnson seemed unusually nervous and agitated throughout the entire field trip, frequently checking his mirrors and taking an unexpected detour from the planned route. Johnson kept muttering about taking a more scenic path, Anderson had told investigators 16 years ago, but the weather was getting worse, and I thought we should stick to the main roads. His description of Johnson's behavior had seemed relatively unimportant in 1985, but now carried sinister implications. Thomas Wilson, Willowbrook Elementary's administrator who had organized the field trip, had exhibited strange behavior in the weeks preceding the tragedy, according to newly discovered staff testimony. Several teachers remembered Wilson acting nervous and making unusual inquiries about field trip insurance policies and emergency procedures. He kept asking hypothetical questions about what would happen if children were injured during school activities, recalled the school secretary during her recent interview. "It seemed odd at the time, but we assumed he was just being thorough." The walk back to her car became a nightmare when someone hurled a large rock that struck Patricia squarely in the shoulder, sending her stumbling toward the gravel parking area. A masked figure fled immediately into the dense forest, disappearing before Detective Smith could pursue or identify the attacker. "Someone doesn't want us investigating this case," Smith said grimly, helping Patricia steady herself while examining her bruised shoulder. "But that just confirms we're on the right track." Richard Martinez, the divorced father of victim Brian Wilson, had been fighting an increasingly bitter custody battle in the months before the field trip tragedy. Court records revealed a pattern of escalating threats where Martinez had sworn to take his son away permanently rather than continue sharing custody with his ex-wife. "I'll make sure she never sees Brian again," he had reportedly told neighbors just weeks before the field trip. "One way or another, that boy is coming home with me for good." Detective Smith explained that each potential suspect would now undergo intensive scrutiny using modern investigative techniques that had been unavailable during the original 1985 investigation. Advanced DNA analysis, computer databases, and digital evidence recovery might finally reveal crucial information that had been missed or overlooked decades earlier. "We're going to examine every person who had contact with those children and that bus," he promised. Technology has come a long way since 1985, and someone's lies are finally going to catch up with them. The threatening phone call came just as Patricia arrived home that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained from the day's revelations. Heavy breathing filled the line before a distorted voice whispered menacingly, "Some truth should remain buried, lady. Keep digging and you'll join those kids in the ground." The line went dead immediately, leaving Patricia staring at the silent receiver while fear crept up her spine. Someone was clearly monitoring her involvement in the renewed investigation. Darkness seemed to carry additional weight as Patricia locked her doors and checked every window in her house, realizing that the bus discovery had awakened something dangerous that had been dormant for 16 years. The deliberate brake sabotage meant someone had planned those children's deaths with cold calculation, and that same person was now threatened by the renewed attention to their crime. Sleep would be impossible, knowing that a killer was watching her every move, waiting to silence anyone who came too close to the truth. The confirmation arrived the following morning when the forensic laboratory delivered their preliminary analysis of the bus's braking system to Detective Smith's desk. The brake lines had been severed with surgical precision, using professional-grade cutting tools, eliminating any possibility that the crash resulted from mechanical failure or driver error. "This was premeditated murder," Smith told Patricia during their early morning phone call. "Someone spent considerable time planning exactly how to kill those children and make it look like an accident." The inconsistencies in Donald Anderson's statements became increasingly apparent as Detective Smith reviewed the field trip supervisor's testimony from multiple interviews spanning 16 years. "Anderson keeps changing crucial details about where he was when the bus left the nature trail," Smith explained during their meeting at the police station. "First he claimed he was leading the children on a hike, then he said he was checking the weather, and now he insists he was looking for a restroom." The recently discovered school district archives revealed that Thomas Wilson had been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior in the weeks preceding the tragedy. According to newly surfaced staff testimony, the elementary school secretary had documented Wilson's unusual requests for information about field trip insurance policies and emergency procedures in her daily log. He kept asking hypothetical questions about liability if students were injured during school activities, she had written. His interest in the worst-case scenarios seemed excessive. The disturbing evidence emerged when Patricia visited the courthouse to research public records related to the custody battle involving Richard Martinez and his ex-wife. The court documents showed Martinez had repeatedly violated his restraining order by stalking his ex-wife and son Brian in the months before the field trip. The police were called to Brian's school at least 3 times because Martinez was found lurking near the playground, the court clerk explained. He was obsessed with getting his son back by any means necessary. The access to the school bus garage had been unrestricted for Robert Johnson, who routinely worked overtime shifts alone with the vehicles during the weeks preceding the field trip. The security logs from 1985 showed Johnson signing in for evening maintenance work on multiple occasions when no supervisors were present to monitor his activities. He had complete freedom to tamper with any of the buses without anyone knowing, Detective Smith noted, while reviewing the employment records. The school district's security protocols were practically non-existent back then. Anderson's renewed questioning session at the police station revealed nervous behavior and increasingly contradictory details about why he had separated from the children during the nature walk that preceded the bus crash. "I told you before I was checking the trail conditions," Anderson stammered when pressed about his exact location during the critical time period. "No, wait. I was looking for a place where the kids could eat lunch safely. Actually, I think I was taking attendance to make sure everyone was accounted for." The Wilson's personnel file contained multiple complaints from teachers about his inappropriate interest in student records and his unusual requests for information about children's home situations and family backgrounds. Several staff members had reported feeling uncomfortable when Wilson asked detailed questions about which students would be attending specific field trips. He seemed particularly interested in children from single-parent homes or families going through divorces, one teacher had noted in her complaint. It felt like he was targeting vulnerable kids for some reason. Martinez's obsession with his son Brian had escalated far beyond normal parental concern, according to the surveillance evidence discovered in his ex-wife's divorce attorney's files. The private investigators had documented Martinez secretly photographing the school building and recording Brian's daily schedule for weeks before the field trip. He knew exactly when Brian would be at school, what time classes ended, and which activities his son participated in, the attorney explained. His behavior had become genuinely frightening for the entire family. The Johnsons' maintenance logs revealed unauthorized work performed on the specific bus that crashed, including brake system inspections that hadn't been requested by supervisors or required by the maintenance schedule. The school district's transportation director had no record of approving Johnson's additional work on that particular vehicle. He was supposed to rotate between all the buses equally, the director explained during his recent interview. There was no reason for him to focus so much attention on that one bus unless he had ulterior motives. The threatening message came wrapped around a brick that shattered Patricia's car window while she was attending evening church services with Pastor Clark. "Stop digging or accidents will happen," read the note written in block letters on plain white paper. The attacker had chosen the timing carefully, striking when Patricia's car was parked in the church lot, surrounded by other vehicles. "Whoever did this knows your schedule and has been watching you closely," Pastor Clark observed with growing concern for her safety. Each suspect seemed to have compelling reasons and opportunity for sabotaging the bus, but Detective Smith warned Patricia that determining the truth would require examining the newly discovered physical evidence with extreme caution. Anderson had access to the children and could have separated them for a reason, Smith explained. Wilson knew about the trip planning and insurance details. Martinez had mechanical skills and obsessive motivation. Johnson had unlimited access to the bus itself. Any one of them could be our killer. The darkness felt heavier as Patricia drove home from the police station, constantly checking her rearview mirror for signs of surveillance while processing the day's disturbing revelations. Someone was clearly growing increasingly desperate to stop her from uncovering the truth about what had really happened to those innocent children 16 years ago. The deliberate escalation from anonymous phone calls to physical attacks suggested that the killer was monitoring her every move and preparing to take more drastic measures to protect their secret. Advanced analysis of the bus's mechanical systems revealed that the brake sabotage had required specific automotive tools and professional knowledge that significantly narrowed the list of potential suspects. The forensic engineer's report detailed how the perpetrator had used precision cutting instruments to sever the lines in exactly the right location to cause catastrophic failure on steep mountain roads. "This wasn't random vandalism," Detective Smith explained to Patricia during their morning briefing. "Whoever did this understood exactly how brake systems work and knew precisely where to cut for maximum deadly effect." Renewed questioning of Donald Anderson at the police station revealed significant gaps in his timeline that he couldn't adequately explain, particularly regarding his claims of attempting to find the children after they had separated during the nature walk. "Anderson keeps insisting he was looking for the kids, but he can't tell us where he searched or how long he spent in each area," Detective Smith reported after the lengthy interview session. "His story has more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese, and he gets more nervous every time we press him for specifics." The archived personnel files revealed that Thomas Wilson had a documented history of boundary violations with students and multiple parents' complaints about his inappropriate behavior that the school district had systematically covered up. Several incidents involved Wilson requesting private meetings with children and asking inappropriate questions about their home lives and family situations. The previous superintendent buried these complaints to avoid scandal, the current superintendent admitted during his confidential interview. Wilson should never have been allowed near children, but they swept everything under the rug to protect the district's reputation. Martinez's mechanical background from his auto repair shop had given him the exact technical skills needed to sabotage the brake system in a way that would cause catastrophic failure, specifically on dangerous mountain roads. His expertise with automotive systems meant he would have known precisely how to time the brake failure for maximum deadly effect. Martinez understood cars better than most professional mechanics, his former business partner explained during his recent interview. He could have disabled those brakes with his eyes closed and made it look like an accident to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Johnson's unrestricted access to the bus garage had been thoroughly documented through the recently discovered security logs that showed him working alone with the vehicles on multiple late-night occasions during the weeks preceding the field trip. The logs revealed a pattern of unauthorized overtime work that his supervisors hadn't approved or monitored. Johnson was spending way too much time alone with those buses, the former transportation supervisor admitted. "We trusted him completely because he'd been with the district for years, but looking back, his behavior was definitely suspicious and concerning. Patricia's systematic interviews with other parents revealed that Anderson had been asking strange questions about which specific children would be attending the field trip and their individual family situations. Several mothers remembered feeling uncomfortable when Anderson inquired about single-parent households and which children might be more vulnerable or less closely supervised. He seemed particularly interested in kids like Michael, whose fathers weren't around, one mother recalled. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough about supervision needs, but now it seems really creepy and inappropriate. Wilson's background check had revealed previous allegations of inappropriate behavior at his former school district, allegations that had been carefully suppressed during his hiring process at Willowbrook Elementary. The human resources director from his previous position finally admitted that Wilson had been quietly transferred rather than properly investigated when parents complained about his conduct. "We should have reported him to the state licensing board," she confessed. "Instead, we just passed the problem along to another district to avoid dealing with the legal complications and negative publicity." Martinez's surveillance of the school had been far more extensive than initially realized, with the private investigators' evidence showing that he had been photographing bus routes and driver schedules for months before the tragedy occurred. His obsessive documentation included detailed notes about pickup times, route variations, and which drivers worked which shifts. Martinez knew the transportation system better than most employees, the investigator explained. He had mapped out every possible way to intercept his son, and he clearly understood how the whole operation worked from the inside. Johnson's psychological evaluation from his employment file revealed disturbing patterns of behavior around children, including multiple complaints from parents that school administrators had systematically ignored or dismissed over the years. The evaluation noted concerning tendencies toward isolation-seeking behavior and an unusual interest in spending time alone with children, away from adult supervision. The warning signs were all there, the district psychologist admitted, but nobody wanted to believe that someone we trusted with our children could be dangerous, so we rationalized away every red flag. During her evening grocery shopping, Patricia discovered that someone had been asking the store employees detailed questions about her daily routine and shopping habits, indicating that one of the suspects was planning more serious intimidation tactics. The night manager pulled her aside to warn her that a man had been inquiring about what time she usually shopped and whether she always came alone. "He seemed really interested in your schedule," the manager explained with obvious concern. "I didn't like the way he was asking, so I told him I didn't know anything about our customers' personal business." The discovery of her slashed tires the following morning forced Patricia to acknowledge that her involvement in the renewed investigation was putting her in genuine physical danger from someone growing increasingly desperate to stop her. All 4 tires had been deliberately punctured with a sharp object while her car was parked in her own driveway during the night. "This is escalating quickly," Detective Smith observed while examining the damage. "Whoever did this wanted to send a clear message that they know where you live and can get to you anytime they want." As the evidence mounted against multiple suspects, Patricia began to realize that the killer had likely been planning this crime for much longer than anyone had initially suspected, carefully studying the school's procedures and the children's routines before striking. The level of premeditation suggested someone with patience, intelligence, and access to inside information about the field trip planning process. Each suspect remained viable, but the systematic nature of the crime pointed to someone who had been watching and waiting for the perfect opportunity to act on their deadly intentions. Shame finally overcame Donald Anderson's resolve when Detective Smith confronted him with inconsistencies in his timeline during the 3rd intensive questioning session at the police station. Tears streamed down Anderson's face as he admitted the truth that had haunted him for 16 years. He had been having an extramarital affair during the field trip, meeting his secret lover at a downtown Portland hotel while the children were supposed to be under his supervision. "I've lived with this guilt every single day," he sobbed. "Those kids died because I abandoned them for my own selfish desires." The hotel security footage and credit card records from 1985 provided ironclad confirmation of Anderson's presence at the Portland Marriott during the exact time frame when the bus had crashed in the remote canyon. The timestamp on the security video showed Anderson entering the hotel lobby at 10:30 a.m., just 30 minutes before the estimated time of the crash. "He couldn't have been anywhere near that canyon when the accident occurred," Detective Smith told Patricia during their afternoon briefing. "His alibi is solid, despite being morally reprehensible." Patricia felt a mixture of disgust and relief as she processed the revelation that Anderson's selfish affair had left 6 innocent children without proper adult supervision during their final hours. While his infidelity cleared him of murder charges, it revealed the criminal negligence that had contributed to the tragedy's success. How could he live with himself knowing he abandoned those kids? Patricia asked Detective Smith. Michael trusted him to keep everyone safe, and instead Anderson was in some hotel room betraying his wife and his responsibilities. The investigation now shifted its intense focus to Thomas Wilson's documented history of inappropriate behavior with students and his concerning interest in field trip planning and insurance procedures. Wilson's access to detailed information about which children would be attending the trip, combined with his disturbing pattern of boundary violations, made him an increasingly compelling suspect. Wilson knew everything about the trip logistics, Detective Smith explained. He could have easily provided inside information to someone else or planned the sabotage himself, using his administrative access to school operations. Martinez remained a strong suspect when investigators uncovered additional evidence that he had been systematically tracking the school bus maintenance schedule and had developed detailed knowledge of the district's transportation systems. His mechanical expertise from his auto repair background, combined with his obsessive desire to regain custody of his son Brian, provided both the means and motive for the brake sabotage. Martinez had the technical skills and desperate motivation, Detective Smith noted. A man fighting for custody might convince himself that eliminating his child's classmates would somehow bring his son back to him. Johnson's personnel records revealed a deeply disturbing pattern of volunteering for field trips and consistently requesting assignments that would give him isolated access to children away from school premises. His supervisor's notes documented numerous occasions when Johnson had volunteered for overnight trips, camping excursions, and remote field studies that other drivers had avoided. Johnson always wanted the trips that took kids far from town, his former supervisor admitted during her recent interview. Looking back, his enthusiasm for those isolated assignments seems really creepy and suspicious. Wilson's administrative access to student records and detailed field trip planning had given him insider knowledge about which specific children would be on the bus and the exact route through the dangerous canyon roads. His position allowed him to influence trip logistics and potentially coordinate with outside accomplices who might have carried out the actual sabotage. Wilson could have orchestrated everything from behind the scenes, Patricia suggested during her meeting with Detective Smith. He had the access, the knowledge, and apparently the disturbed psychology to target innocent children. Martinez's obsessive behavior had escalated to the point where he had been breaking into Willowbrook Elementary after hours to access Brian's classroom and steal personal belongings that belonged to his son. Security logs revealed multiple unauthorized entries into the school building during evening hours when Martinez should have been restricted by his court-ordered restraining order. He was completely obsessed with getting Brian back, his ex-wife's attorney explained. Martinez would have done anything to eliminate the obstacles he perceived were keeping him from his son, including Brian's friends and classmates. Johnson's extensive driving experience and mechanical knowledge made him uniquely capable of sabotaging the brakes in a way that would cause the catastrophic failure at precisely the most dangerous point along the mountain route. His years of experience driving school buses through treacherous terrain meant he understood exactly where and how to cause a crash that would appear accidental to investigators. Johnson knew every curve and cliff on that mountain road, the transportation director confirmed. If anyone could have planned a crash to look like an accident, it would have been him. The threatening phone call came during Patricia's evening meal preparation, the distorted voice delivering a chilling message that made her blood run cold. "You're playing with fire in a gunpowder warehouse, lady. Stop now, or the explosion will consume everything you love." The caller hung up immediately, leaving Patricia staring at the silent phone while fear crept through her entire body. "Lord, give me wisdom to know what to do," she whispered, her hands shaking as she realized the killer was growing more desperate and dangerous with each passing day. As the list of suspects narrowed to 3 increasingly viable candidates, Patricia spent long hours in prayer asking for divine guidance to identify the person responsible for destroying so many innocent lives. Each remaining suspect had compelling motives, technical capabilities, and documented access to either the children or the bus itself. Wilson had inside information, Martinez had mechanical skills and obsessive motivation, and Johnson had unlimited access to the vehicle, she told Pastor Clark during their evening phone conversation. But which one of them is evil enough to murder 6 innocent children? Anderson's elimination through his shameful but verifiable alibi only intensified the focus on the remaining suspects, each of whom appeared to have the means, motive, and opportunity to commit this horrific crime against innocent children. The investigation had reached a critical juncture where physical evidence and psychological analysis would determine which of the 3 men had planned and executed the deliberate murder of 6 10-year-old boys. Patricia steeled herself for the difficult revelations ahead, knowing that identifying the killer would require confronting truths that someone was increasingly willing to kill to protect. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel and activate notification bells to hear more stories like this one. Desperation finally broke through the Wilson family's carefully maintained silence when Thomas Wilson's elderly mother arrived at the police station carrying a worn manila envelope filled with psychiatric hospital records from 1985. Through her tears, she explained that her son had suffered a complete nervous breakdown in the weeks before the field trip and had been secretly committed to Damash State Hospital under an involuntary psychiatric hold. "We couldn't let anyone know," she sobbed to Detective Smith. "In 1985, having a son in a mental hospital would have destroyed our family's reputation and ended Thomas's career forever." The medical records provided irrefutable proof that Wilson had been under constant psychiatric supervision during the entire field trip period, making it physically impossible for him to have sabotaged the bus or coordinated with any outside accomplices. His attending psychiatrist's daily notes documented severe depression, suicidal ideation, and complete detachment from reality that had required round-the-clock monitoring. Wilson was strapped to a bed and heavily sedated during the week of the field trip, the retired psychiatrist confirmed during his phone interview. He couldn't have planned a grocery list, much less orchestrated a complex murder scheme. Patricia understood completely why the Wilson family had hidden his mental health crisis for 16 long years, knowing that psychiatric treatment carried devastating social stigma in 1985 that could have destroyed careers and relationships permanently. The family's protective silence had made Wilson appear guilty when he was actually fighting for his sanity in a hospital ward. Mental illness was treated like a shameful family secret back then, Patricia told Detective Smith. They were probably more afraid of the community's judgment than they were of murder accusations. Intense focus now shifted to Richard Martinez's documented obsession with regaining custody of his son Brian and his extensive mechanical expertise that gave him the technical skills needed to sabotage the bus's braking system. Court records revealed that Martinez had been systematically violating his restraining order while developing increasingly elaborate plans to kidnap his son from his ex-wife's custody. Martinez saw Brian's classmates as obstacles keeping him from his son, Detective Smith explained during their strategy meeting. In his twisted logic, eliminating those friendships might have seemed like a reasonable solution to his custody problems. Johnson remained under intense scrutiny when maintenance supervisors admitted they had never properly monitored his unauthorized access to the bus garage during late-night hours when no other employees were present. The transportation director's logs showed Johnson had been performing undocumented work on various vehicles, including the specific bus that had crashed in the canyon. "We trusted Robert completely because he'd been with us for years," the director admitted. "But looking back, his insistence on working alone after hours seems really suspicious and inappropriate." Martinez's surveillance of the school had been far more extensive and systematic than investigators had initially realized, with evidence showing he had been planning to take his son for months before the tragedy occurred. Private investigator files revealed detailed photographs of bus routes, driver schedules, and security protocols that Martinez had collected during his obsessive monitoring campaign. He knew every detail of the school's transportation system, the investigator explained. Martinez had been planning some kind of intervention for months, and he clearly understood how to exploit the system's weaknesses. Johnson's pattern of inappropriate behavior around children became increasingly apparent when investigators interviewed former colleagues who admitted they had systematically ignored or rationalized away multiple complaints from parents over the years. Teachers recalled numerous incidents where Johnson had isolated children during trips and made inappropriate comments about their physical development. "We all knew something was off about Robert, but nobody wanted to believe a trusted employee could be dangerous," one teacher confessed. "Every warning sign was there, but we just looked the other way." Martinez's extensive background in automotive repair had given him intimate knowledge of brake systems and the precise techniques needed to cause the type of catastrophic failure that had occurred on the mountain road. His former business partner confirmed that Martinez understood vehicle mechanics better than most certified technicians and could have easily sabotaged the brakes without leaving obvious evidence. Richard could take apart and rebuild any brake system blindfolded, his partner explained. If he wanted to cause an accident, he would have known exactly how to do it. Johnson's psychological profile revealed disturbing control issues and an obsession with being alone with children in isolated locations, far from adult supervision and community oversight. Personnel evaluations noted his unusual enthusiasm for field trips to remote destinations and his consistent requests for assignments that would take him away from the school environment. Robert always volunteered for the trips that other drivers avoided, his supervisor recalled. He seemed to prefer situations where he would be the only adult authority figure responsible for children's safety. The attack on Patricia's vehicle occurred while she was attending Wednesday evening prayer service at Salem Community Church, with someone using a heavy hammer to systematically destroy both side mirrors while her car sat in the church parking lot. Pastor Clark discovered the damage when he walked her to her vehicle after the service, finding shattered glass scattered across the asphalt. Whoever did this wanted to send a clear message that they know your schedule and can reach you anywhere, he observed with growing concern. This person is becoming more bold and dangerous. Both remaining suspects possessed compelling motives and the technical capability to commit this horrific crime, but Detective Smith warned Patricia that determining the final truth would require confronting increasingly dangerous evidence that someone was willing to kill to protect. Martinez had the mechanical skills and desperate custody motivation, Smith explained during their evening phone call. Johnson had unlimited access and a disturbing psychological profile. Either one could be our killer, but the evidence suggests someone who planned this crime very carefully. The evening shadows seemed to carry additional menace as Patricia realized that identifying the killer would require confronting truths that had been carefully hidden for 16 years by someone willing to murder innocent children. Both Martinez and Johnson had demonstrated the means, motive, and opportunity to sabotage the bus, but only one of them was evil enough to have actually carried out the systematic murder of 6 10-year-old boys. "Lord, protect me as I seek justice for these innocent children," she prayed while checking her door locks. "Give me wisdom to identify the monster responsible for this evil." Shame and desperation finally compelled Martinez's ex-wife to reveal the humiliating secret that had protected her violent former husband from murder accusations for 16 long years. Through her tears, she handed Detective Smith the court documents proving that Martinez had been secretly incarcerated in Marion County Jail for domestic violence during the exact week of the field trip. "I couldn't let my children know their father was in jail for beating me," she sobbed during her emotional confession. "The family shame was more important to me than clearing his name in a murder case." The jail records and guard testimony provided absolute confirmation of Martinez's presence in county lockup during the entire field trip period, making it physically impossible for him to have sabotaged the bus or harmed any of the children. His booking photograph was time-stamped 3 days before the tragedy, and security logs showed he had remained in custody until a week after the crash occurred. "Martinez was behind bars when those kids died," Detective Smith told Patricia during their afternoon meeting. "His alibi is ironclad, despite the family's efforts to hide his violent criminal record." With all other suspects eliminated through verifiable alibis, the investigation now focused entirely on Robert Johnson, whose unlimited access to the school bus and deeply disturbing history with children made him the only remaining viable suspect. Johnson's psychological profile, combined with his mechanical expertise and opportunity to sabotage the vehicle, painted a picture of a calculating predator who had carefully planned the tragedy. Johnson had everything he needed to carry out this crime, Detective Smith explained. Access, knowledge, motivation, and 16 years of successfully hiding his guilt from everyone who trusted him. The remote search area in the Cascade Mountains became a scene of heartbreaking discovery when specialized cadaver dogs finally located the remains of all 6 missing children in a hidden cave system approximately half a mile from the bus crash site. Patricia accompanied Detective Smith to witness the recovery operation, her heart breaking as small body bags were carefully transported from the cave entrance. "At least now we know where they are," she whispered through her tears. "Michael and his friends can finally come home to their families after all these years." Forensic examination of the cave site revealed the horrifying truth that the children had survived the initial bus crash, but had been systematically removed from the vehicle and held captive in the prepared underground location before dying from trauma and exposure. The medical examiner's preliminary findings showed evidence of restraint marks and defensive wounds that indicated the children had fought desperately against their captor. "These kids didn't die in the crash," the examiner explained grimly. "They were kidnapped from the wreckage and murdered in that cave over a period of several days." Evidence scattered throughout the cave included rope restraints, makeshift bedding, and camping supplies that prove Johnson had prepared the location well in advance as part of his elaborate plan to isolate and abuse the children. The cave showed signs of recent visitation, with Johnson apparently returning to the site multiple times over the years to relive his crime. "He turned that cave into a torture chamber," Detective Smith observed, while examining the disturbing evidence. Johnson had been planning this for months, maybe years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to act. The children's final positioning in the cave revealed the systematic nature of their murders, with forensic evidence showing they had been killed individually when they attempted to escape from their underground prison. Each child's remains told a story of desperate struggle against an adult predator who had overpowered them through size and violence. "They tried to run," the forensic anthropologist explained during her preliminary report, "but Johnson hunted them down one by one and murdered them to prevent their escape." Johnson's original plan had been to stage the bus accident and then return as a supposed rescuer to select specific survivors whom he could take to his prepared cave location for extended abuse and torture. The crash's severity had exceeded his expectations, forcing him to adapt his plan by removing all the children from the wreckage rather than choosing favorites. "He wanted living victims, not dead ones," Detective Smith explained, "but when the crash injured them too severely, Johnson decided to kill them all rather than risk exposure." Months of careful investigation revealed that Johnson had been systematically grooming these specific children through his position as their trusted school bus driver, learning their personalities and vulnerabilities while planning which ones would be most suitable for his sick fantasies. Teacher interviews confirmed that Johnson had shown unusual interest in the 6 boys who were ultimately selected for the field trip. "He knew exactly which kids he wanted," the school counselor admitted. Johnson had been studying those boys for months, learning everything about their families and home situations. The attack on Patricia came as she left the county morgue after viewing Michael's remains, with a masked figure pushing her violently down the concrete steps leading to the parking area. Her injuries were minor, but the message was clear. Johnson knew she was getting close to the truth and was becoming increasingly desperate to stop her investigation. "He's watching your every move," Detective Smith warned while helping her to his patrol car. "Johnson realizes we're closing in on him, and desperate killers become extremely dangerous." Johnson's guilt became undeniable when search teams discovered his remote cabin stocked with additional restraints, camping supplies, and disturbing photographs of the 6 murdered children that he had apparently taken during their captivity. The evidence painted a picture of a methodical predator who had planned every detail of his crime with chilling precision. "He kept trophies," Detective Smith explained grimly. "Johnson documented his crimes like some kind of sick hobby, never thinking anyone would find his hideout after all these years." As overwhelming evidence pointed directly to Johnson as the sole perpetrator of this unspeakable crime against innocent children, Patricia steeled herself for the final confrontation that would bring justice for Michael and his 5 murdered classmates. The monster who had destroyed so many lives was finally within reach, but Patricia knew that cornering a desperate killer would require courage she could only find through divine strength. "Lord, give me the power to face this evil man," she prayed, while preparing for the most dangerous moment of her 16-year quest for truth. "Help me bring justice for these precious children." Sunrise cast long shadows through the dense Oregon forest as Detective Smith and Patricia approached Johnson's isolated cabin, where they discovered a horrifying shrine filled with photographs and personal items belonging to all 6 murdered children, displayed like twisted trophies. The small wooden structure sat miles from any neighbors, surrounded by towering evergreen trees that had hidden Johnson's secret activities for decades. "This is where he's been coming to relive his crimes," Smith whispered as they observed the cabin through binoculars. "Look at how carefully he's arranged everything. This is his personal museum of murder." Johnson sat calmly on his front porch when they approached, initially denying any involvement in the children's deaths, with the same bland expression he had maintained for 16 years of questioning. "I don't know what you're talking about," he insisted, when Detective Smith confronted him with the physical evidence linking him to the prepared cave site and the children's brutal murders. However, his composure cracked completely when Patricia held up Michael's class ring that they had discovered among his collection of victims' belongings inside the cabin. Tears streamed down Johnson's face as he confessed the full scope of his depravity, revealing that he had spent months planning to stage the bus accident and then return as a supposed rescuer to select specific children for his sick fantasies. "I was going to save some of them," he sobbed, his voice breaking with twisted emotion. "The plan was to let a few die in the crash and then rescue the ones I wanted for myself. I had everything prepared in the cave: food, blankets, chains. They were supposed to live so I could have them forever." Johnson's psychological breakdown had occurred when he realized the children were too severely injured from the crash to survive long enough for his planned abuse, forcing him to adapt his fantasy by taking all 6 boys to the cave where they died, despite his desperate attempts to keep them alive. "They were hurt worse than I expected," he explained through his tears. "I thought I could nurse them back to health in the cave, but they kept trying to escape and making noise. I had to stop them from running away and alerting rescuers to my location." The peaceful morning erupted into chaos when Johnson suddenly grabbed a hunting rifle from inside his cabin and began chasing Patricia and Detective Smith through the dense forest, while screaming about his rights to the children he had claimed as his property. Trees provided cover as they dodged through the underbrush, but Johnson's intimate knowledge of the terrain gave him a dangerous advantage in the pursuit. "They were mine," he shouted while firing wildly through the branches. "I chose them. I prepared everything for them. They belonged to me." Johnson's desperate attempt to eliminate the only witnesses to his confession nearly succeeded when he cornered Patricia behind a fallen log and aimed his rifle directly at her head. Only Detective Smith's military training saved her life, as he managed to circle behind Johnson and wound him with a precise shot that shattered the killer's shoulder and forced him to drop his weapon. "It's over, Robert," Smith called out, while keeping his gun trained on the wounded predator. 16 years of hiding are finished. Those children can finally rest in peace." The interrogation room at Salem Police Department became a chamber of horrors as Johnson provided sickening details about each child's final moments in the cave, describing their terror and desperation with disturbing clinical precision. His confession revealed systematic torture and psychological manipulation that had prolonged their suffering for days before their eventual deaths. "Michael kept asking for his mother," Johnson told Patricia with apparent satisfaction. "He cried for you every night before I made him stop making noise. They all begged me to let them go home, but I told them this was their new home with me." Johnson's motive became clear through his rambling confession: pure pedophilic obsession combined with an overwhelming need for complete control over innocent victims who would depend entirely on him for survival. His years as a trusted school employee had given him access to study and select children who fit his sick preferences. "I loved them more than their families ever could," he insisted during his psychiatric evaluation. "In the cave, they were all mine. No parents, no teachers, no rules except what I decided. That's how it was supposed to be forever." Johnson's arrest brought initial relief to the families and community members who had suffered 16 years of uncertainty, but the full extent of his depravity left Salem struggling to comprehend how such evil had hidden among them for so long. Parents questioned every interaction their children had ever had with the trusted bus driver who had transported their kids safely for years. How many other children did he hurt? Became the terrifying question that haunted every family in the school district. How did we miss all the warning signs for so many years? Patricia felt overwhelming grief wash over her as she finally learned the truth about Michael's final terrifying days in Johnson's underground prison, knowing that her innocent 10-year-old son had died calling for her help that would never come. The knowledge that Michael had suffered for days rather than dying quickly in the crash made his loss feel fresh and devastating all over again. "I failed him," she sobbed to Pastor Clark during their evening phone call. "While I was searching everywhere else, my baby was trapped in that cave being tortured by a monster." The case appeared officially closed with Johnson's detailed confession and arrest, but Patricia couldn't ignore his disturbing references to preparations and others who understand that suggested additional secrets might still be hidden beneath the surface. His rambling statements about a network and people who help seemed to indicate that Johnson might not have been working alone. "There are others," he had whispered to Detective Smith during transport, "others who know what these children are really for. This won't end with just me." As evening shadows lengthened across Salem, Patricia left the police station feeling deeply unsettled by Johnson's cryptic warnings that the network wouldn't allow his arrest to end their activities permanently. His confident smile during his final statement suggested that capturing him was only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous truth. "Lord, give me courage for whatever comes next," Patricia prayed while driving home through the quiet streets. "I fear this evil runs deeper than any of us realized, and the danger may not be over yet." Terror struck Salem when news broke that Robert Johnson had escaped during prisoner transport, overpowering his guards with help from an unidentified accomplice who had been monitoring the police convoy route. The escape occurred on a remote stretch of highway, where the accomplice had disabled the transport vehicle using a stolen pickup truck, allowing Johnson to flee with a cache of weapons taken from the guards. Johnson had inside help, Detective Smith explained during the emergency briefing. "Someone has been planning this rescue operation since the moment we arrested him, which confirms his claims about a larger network." Detective Smith's frantic phone call reached Patricia just as she was preparing dinner, his voice tight with urgency as he warned her that Johnson had stolen multiple firearms and was heading directly back towards Salem with what appeared to be a final plan for revenge against her. "He blames you for destroying everything he built over the years," Smith explained while coordinating the manhunt from his patrol car. "Johnson told his accomplice that you're the reason his network is being exposed, and he's coming to silence you permanently before we can arrest the other members." Patricia moved quickly through her house, locking every door and window while pushing furniture against the main entrances as police units searched the surrounding neighborhoods for any sign of the escaped killer. The knowledge that Johnson blamed her for disrupting his carefully hidden predatory network made her realize that his revenge would be brutal and personal. "Lord, protect me from this evil man," she prayed while checking her security systems. "Give me strength to survive whatever he has planned for me tonight." The basement window shattered around midnight, with Johnson using his intimate knowledge of Salem's residential construction to access Patricia's house through the rarely secured lower level. She heard his footsteps moving slowly through the basement before climbing the stairs toward Michael's old bedroom, where she had taken refuge with her phone. "I'm coming for you, Patricia," Johnson called out in a sing-song voice that chilled her blood. "You destroyed everything I worked for, and now you're going to pay the ultimate price for your interference." The final confrontation was brutal and terrifying, as Johnson attempted to strangle Patricia with his bare hands, while confessing to additional crimes involving dozens of other children over the past 2 decades. His grip tightened around her throat as he revealed the scope of his network's activities throughout Oregon and Washington. "We've been doing this for years," he gasped while she struggled beneath his weight. "Foster homes, group homes, summer camps, places where nobody cares about missing kids. You have no idea how many children we've taken over the years." Patricia fought desperately for her life using Michael's old aluminum baseball bat, striking Johnson repeatedly while he revealed the names of his accomplices who had been operating throughout the Pacific Northwest for decades. "Dr. Morrison at the Children's Hospital, Principal Jenkins at Riverside Elementary, Coach Patterson at the Youth Sports League," he gasped between her blows. "They're all part of it. We protect each other and share information about vulnerable children. Your investigation is going to destroy all of us." Detective Smith and his backup officers burst through the front door just as Johnson was about to overpower Patricia completely, leading to a violent shootout that filled Michael's bedroom with gunfire and shattered glass. Johnson's desperation made him reckless, and he exposed himself while trying to use Patricia as a human shield. "Drop your weapon," Smith shouted before firing the shot that ended Johnson's life permanently. "It's over, Patricia. He can never hurt anyone again." Johnson's death ensured that he could never harm another innocent child, while his final confessions provided investigators with the information needed to arrest the additional predators who had been operating throughout the region for years. Within weeks, coordinated raids led to multiple arrests of respected community members who had been secretly abusing their positions of trust. "Johnson's network is finished," Detective Smith told Patricia during the aftermath briefing. "His death broke their conspiracy of silence, and every member is either dead or in custody now." The community of Salem began the long process of healing from the shocking revelation that their children had been threatened by an organized network of predators operating in plain sight for decades. Parents struggled to comprehend how trusted figures like doctors, teachers, and coaches had been systematically targeting vulnerable children. "At least now we know the truth," Patricia told the other victims' families during their support group meeting. "Our children's deaths exposed this evil and saved countless other kids from the same fate." Patricia found genuine peace for the first time in 16 years, knowing that Michael and his 5 friends could finally rest while their killer had been punished and the broader threat to children had been permanently eliminated. The knowledge that their deaths had led to the destruction of an entire predatory network gave meaning to their tragic sacrifice. They died as heroes, she told Pastor Clark during their final counseling session. Michael and his friends saved so many other children by exposing these monsters to the light. In the quiet moments following the resolution of the case, Patricia spent long hours in prayer, thanking God for giving her the supernatural strength needed to pursue justice even when the path seemed impossible and life-threatening. The divine protection she had experienced during the most dangerous moments convinced her that God had been guiding her steps throughout the entire ordeal. "I could never have survived this alone," she told her prayer group. "God carried me through every terrifying moment and gave me courage when my own strength failed completely." Patricia understood with perfect clarity that divine justice had ultimately prevailed over human evil, proving that God sees everything and ensures that wickedness cannot hide forever in the darkness. The peace that filled her wounded but grateful heart came from knowing that Michael's death had served a greater purpose in God's plan to protect innocent children from predators. Evil thought it could hide behind respectability and position, she reflected during her final journal entry about the case. But God's light exposed every shadow and brought perfect justice to those who thought they were beyond human law. If you enjoyed the story, please like the video, write in the comments where you're listening from, and subscribe and activate notification bells. I'll see you in the next story on our channel.